Hi folks, this is Carly, Chief Executive of Driving Instructors Association and, for my sins, current Chair of National Association Strategic Partnership, known as NASP. I thought I'd just give you a quick video update and a run through some of the key developments in our industry this month. I know we've done a lot of them throughout the COVID-19 crisis, not so much lately as we've focused on the kind of getting you back to work pieces and webinars and our post-lockdown training kit. But as some of you expressed a desire to see more of these types of videos, we've decided to do one today. Particularly, there's quite a lot of stuff happening in the industry. And it would occur to me that a summary of those is quite useful. The first thing that we're going to focus on, not in massive detail here because we're working on some communications on this subject in particular, is what continuing financial support is out there for driver trainers. I know some people have been able to resume their business in the last few weeks since testing has resumed itself, but some are also still shielding or making the decision not to risk going back to work at this time. And even those who are going back to work are wondering, what assistance is there to help keep them going as they slowly start to develop income again. They will shortly be starting the process for the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme. This is the one run by HMRC. Those of you who were eligible could claim for 3 months of up to 80% of your earnings as per your tax return. And that first scheme was open for application up to the 14th of July, so that's now closed. There will be a second phase of this scheme, and applications will start to be processed on that from the 17th of August. So watch out for more news on that. We're, as I say, developing some guidance on that at this moment in time. But you can also check on HMRC's pages on gov.uk, and I'm sure they'll also be sending out updates. HMRC have also been doing some quite useful seminars and webinars during this period, so it's worth visiting their pages and attending some of those recorded or live webinars as well. There are also the business loans that we spoke of before, the business loans where you can apply for anything between £2,000 and £50,000 of funding, and that's repayable over a 6-year period, with the first 12 months of that lending being interest-free. It's a government-backed security, government-backed loan, so you don't have to put any security up for yourself. They're called bounce-back loans. If you Google those, there's plenty of information of those online. They are for businesses who have been affected by coronavirus, which obviously yours has. And they are available, I think, till November this year in terms of applications, and you can apply through most high street banks. But if you go on our YouTube channel or you look back at your member emails, we've also done a webinar on it. You'll find lots of advice from DIA on these business bounce-back loans. So there's a couple of areas that if you haven't even looked into this yet, there is some financial support. That takes me to my next kind of update on continuing to survive without being able to deliver training. This is a very relevant topic for those members in Scotland and Northern Ireland. Now, Northern Ireland at least have got some line of sight on when testing will resume. The Northern Ireland government have said that testing for category B vehicles will start in September, the 1st of September, in fact. In Scotland, it's a more disappointing picture in that motorcycle and some areas of vocational training have been allowed to restart, and they will start from the start of August. However, the First Minister has still given no indication on when she will allow driver testing to resume. Now, that is an important distinction here, when the Scottish Government will allow. This is not Driving and Vehicle Standards Agency failing to resume testing in Scotland. And I know we will often at NASP be accused of being apologists for DVSA, but you do have to report on the facts of the matter and what is the principal reason for a failure for a service to restart. And in Scotland, this is a Scottish Government decision not to allow testing to resume. DVSA would very much like testing resume because A, they want to provide the service, and B, any area that is not getting itself up to speed will cause delays and impacts on the wider service at a later date as it comes on stream. And to be playing catch up on a national basis anyway, and then have Scotland being later in the curve, is not helpful to them, nor is it helpful to pupils and trainers as well. We have written, NASP has written, so I've written in my capacity of chair today with my colleagues from ADI, NJC and MSA to the First Minister and business ministers in Scotland to ask them where their guidance is and where their communications are to driver trainers who have been severely impacted by this continuing lack of testing in Scotland. What I've also asked is what financial support measures could be put in place to assist these members who continue to look at the fact that they can't see a pipeline of income occurring anytime soon, and how are they expected to continue to keep their business going and their family supported if they don't know when they're going to be able to go back to work. So we have asked that question, we have asked for guidance, we have asked them to point to where is the money coming from if people can't go out and derive their income from their normal training business. Equally, I've also written to government today in my capacity as chairman of NASP to ask what will happen in terms of regional lockdowns. So we've had the news today that not only is Leicester under lockdown, wide tranches of the north of England will now be put into regional lockdowns as well, and more on what do those lockdowns look like in terms of impacting driver training at the moment. But what I've asked for in this specific communication is, as we are sadly facing and looking at a future landscape where regional and even national lockdowns may occur and again, there is no short-term solution until we have a vaccine for COVID, really, other than locking down and shielding. What's going to happen to support those self-employed businesses and other businesses that have no form of income unless their doors are open and their business is trading? So we've asked government that, given that this next round of the self-employment income support scheme will end after August, or so government has said, given the fact that the business loans will end in November, if we're going to continue to have this disruption and these lockdowns where people sometimes might not be able to deliver training, what financial support measures will be available to people in those positions? What I've also asked in that letter is, with test and trace, whereby if you are identified by someone or the NHS contacts you and said you've been in contact with somebody who has COVID-19, you now have to self-isolate for 14 days. Again, is there going to be a rolling programme of financial support measures that trainers and other self-employed people can tap into if they have a notification that they have been infected potentially, and that they might have to quarantine and self-isolate for 14 days and not work for 14 days. Don't work, don't get paid unless you've locked in your income, as we suggested in previous back to business webinars, and as we suggest overall that the industry needs to change to less of a hand-to-mouth, lesson-by-lesson existence, more of a contracting volumes of income, getting people to pay up front for blocks of lessons, all those kind of things. So whilst we're asking those questions of government at the moment about support measures, you also need to think about the future landscape may be very disrupted still. There may be periods where you cannot work, either through test and trace, identifying you as someone who has to self-isolate for 2 weeks, or you face a regional lockdown. So going back to what we've said, and listen again, or listen for the first time if you haven't, in those webinars that we've done on back to business and managing the finances, where we give advice about having some at least 3 months if you can, contingency funds in the bank account, locking in income, contracting income, having better line of sight of money coming in and locking that money in so you don't have to live lesson to lesson anymore. And also things like changing how you charge and what you charge to make sure you're able to operate a buffer financially in your business as well. So those are some of the things that we want to flag to you that are in your lap to have a look at and see what you can do about, but also flag that we're talking to wider government about what support can be given to people as well. On the subject of regional lockdowns, obviously DVSA, like us and the rest of us, have been appraised today and last night of the lockdowns in the north of England. They had measures in place for Leicester because that was a known at the time as they were coming back to testing. In terms of these latest regional lockdowns, as of today, Friday morning, they are still considering the advice and looking at the government guidance and deciding how that impacts their services. So we have sought guidance to DVSA. They're not able to give much much at this moment in time. What we are prescribing is have a look at local guidance for your area from your local authority. NASP, I've just drafted this morning, and we'll shortly publish some guidelines on, for driver trainers and rider trainers, what happens when your area becomes locked down. What we've been able to draw on is some existing regional guidance for areas like Leicester. There's some government advice for what to do if you're in a lockdown area outside of Leicester and you're interacting with people from outside your household. But the best advice I can give you is keep an eye on what gov.uk is saying about lockdowns in regions. But also remember that in this scenario, the local authority is granted powers by central government to make decisions about what it does in terms of its own regional lockdown. So local authorities will make local provisions for their lockdowns. So you need to be appraised of what are the provisions, what are the restrictions that are occurring in your area, because they may be slightly different from the ones in another region. You need to look at what's relevant to you. In the NASP guidance, we've also looked at, your risk management. Obviously, in any lockdown situation, you need to consider whether continuing to train presents a risk to you or to your pupils or to the wider population. You need to consider whether it's worth you going into a lockdown area. For example, if you live outside a lockdown area, but you normally ply your trade in a lockdown area, are you going to continue to do that at this moment in time? What precautions will you take in doing that? If you live in a lockdown area and work in a lockdown area, what is your risk, and how are you going to manage that as well? Because kind of people going in and out of lockdown areas, will essentially, you think you can't because they're locked down, but there is still some transit happening of populations between them, and people are still allowed to do certain things in lockdown areas, albeit only with their own household. But there still is the opportunity for infection and spread of infection to occur even in lockdown areas. So it's important that the driver trainers are responsible about that and think about how these lockdowns impact where they apply their trade and what they do and which pupils they are teaching at this moment in time. So have a look at that guidance when it's published later today. That might be useful to you. But as I said, keep an eye on local guidance as well as central government guidance, because it will be tailored to your area. We've been dealing with lots of queries on the booking system for rescheduled tests, the invite emails, and whether slots are available and whether things are working. As you will have seen from an email that we sent out yesterday to members or the day before, we have taken a lot of those issues back to DVSA and asked for some feedback on those. It's really important that you keep that feedback going. What might be occurring as a little local issue, if it doesn't get addressed, can become a national issue. So thank you so much for people who send through their feedback. It really is important to, as you're at the coalface, you know how these issues are impacting you. Although regional test centre managers and staff on the ground have been part of DVSA's consultation on how they develop this service, it's only really when these services hit the ground running and are put into practice that you realise all the teething problems and all the issues. So ADIs and rider trainers reporting in your local issues helps develop and improve the whole national delivery as well. So keep those views coming. We are trying to address those. We did issue a warning, mainly to pupils, not to trainers, this week as well, about encouraging people not to leap too soon when they get their rescheduled test invite. There is on average a 6-week window. I know in some areas it's longer. Some people are looking at not being able to book a test until January when they look at what's available. That may be sometimes though because they can't book a test at the test center they want to be at until January. They do maybe have to look at sometimes travelling to a test centre outside the area that they would like to be able to train and test within as well. So encouraging pupils to look outside their favoured test centre and maybe travel if they want a test sooner is always advised at any time there's a shortage of tests as well. You'll remember, I think it was 2017 when we had the long waiting times of tests, that was advice that we're giving as well, that there are tests available in a time frame that people would possibly like, that they're just not necessarily going to be in a test centre that's the nearest to them or the one they prefer to be at. So there has to be some flexibility there. But the more important point is that we don't want pupils to just grab the soonest date that they can see if it doesn't give them adequate time to get in the car again with their professional trainer and have that refresher training. That's important at any time, that pupils have got to go to the test centre when they're ready, not just when they want to. They've got to be adequately prepared and have an adequate period of preparation before they go to test centre. That's even more relevant and important at this moment in time, as pupils want to rush into it, but we don't want people who have been mothballed in terms of their skills and their training for a very long while now, since March. We don't want them just grabbing the first slot available, not having the time with you in the car, going to that test centre, because if they fail, they are not getting a retest in the short term. They will have to wait until the booking system, the OBS, the normal booking system, reopens and all new test slots are available. Those pupils who fail their tests now are not going to be prioritised in that system. They've failed one test that they've had an opportunity to take, an opportunity to train for. They're not going to be prioritised above everybody else that's been waiting to book a new test, that are outside of that group who have been waiting for their rescheduled test. With over 200,000 tests being rescheduled, and then the pressure of allowing new tests to be scheduled, we've got to counsel our pupils to be really sensible about the dates that they pick for their retest, for their rescheduled test, and being adequately prepared for those tests as well. And if the leverage that you use with them is, if you don't have that time in car with me training, you may fail because of that lack of preparation, and you're going to wait a long time, probably right into the autumn, for a retest, then that might make them think twice about leaping for the earliest date that they can get their hands on as well. But again, keep your feedback coming to us about the booking situation. DVSA are working on fixes where they can, but we need to highlight fixes where they're not necessarily aware that there's an issue at this time. The last thing I wanted to very quickly focus on is we also sent out a communication to members this week on the changes to the Parts 2, 3 and Standards Check, the ADI assessments. The standard operating procedures developed by DVSA in consultation with some audit trainers, a handful of audit trainers that were chosen to act as a guinea pig group, and representatives from NASP as well, have now been published. Those standard operating procedures for the examiner, so they'll speak very much in terms of the view of the examiner. NASP has provided some guidance on top of that. In essence, the main changes are the amount of time in vehicle described by DVSA as wheels turning has been shortened to 40 minutes for the Parts 2, 3 and Standards Check. The pre-brief and debrief will be shorter as well, will now take place outside the car for obvious reasons. We need to limit the amount of time in an enclosed vehicle. Even if it's ventilated and everybody's taking precautions such as face coverings, you still need to be limiting the amount of time people are in that enclosed environment. So the pre-brief and debrief will take place outside the car. There are some other changes as well, but essentially the assessment should run as normal. You're not being expected to provide anything different in terms of your performance than you provide normally. No beginners lessons are acceptable on this. It's a waste of time in this process, particularly when it's expedient to do as many of these as they possibly can for people to bring a beginner lesson. So if you bring a beginner lesson, you will probably be having your Standards Check or Part 3 terminated, and it'll be rearranged for another date, and you will lose your fee as well. What is different as well is the introduction, because of the pre-brief and debrief being shortened and outside the car. The DVSA are going to introduce something called an engagement call. So that means that a member of the AGI enforcement team, probably a driving examiner, will call the candidate, the PDI or the ADI, a week or so before their assessment to discuss with them that they know what's going to happen, they know the format, to voice any concerns about that, anything they don't understand, to arrange a meeting point, a rendezvous for that particular assessment. That will generally be at the test centre where possible, but it may be that the examiner and the ADI, PDI agree a location between them that works better, particularly with COVID-19. Some test centres are going to be very busy, so they want to limit the number of people appearing at them. That engagement call is the opportunity for the candidate to ask any questions they have. It is not, however, a coaching or training opportunity. So the examiner will not be coaching or offering any training or any feedback in that call. They will be advising the ADI or PDI to have a look at the Crystal report, which is available to them. So you all have the ability to look at your fault analysis, which is a report that comes off their system known as a Crystal report. So you will be advised to have a look at that because it shows you your fault analysis picture across your candidates. place, and there is some CPD and learning in that for yourself. They may be your candidate's faults, but if there's a pattern there, it's worth looking at whether they're faults that impact you as well and how you teach. So there will be advising some training, some looking at faults analysis, all those kind of things to help you prepare for that opportunity. So take a look at those changes and how they might impact you as a PDI or an ADI. NASP is just working on a video to walk through those changes, and also we're going to do a video of what the engagement call might look like for PDI and ADI, so you have a better level of familiarity with all this. So that should be available to you shortly. That's all I really have in terms of big updates or highlighting what we're working on as your association at this moment in time, or as the National Association Strategic Partnership. Keep your feedback coming to us, either as NASP or DIA members through the usual channels on the help desk. It's hearing what's happening for you on the ground, what your worries are, what your concerns are, and your challenges that help us devise solutions or seek solutions and answers from other parties as well. So it's really useful you keep in contact with us. Bear in mind, sometimes you might have to bear with us in terms of how busy that help desk gets. Even as people return to work, you think it'll get quieter. It's actually got busier as people have got more and more questions as they go back to work. But we always try and aim to get back to you as soon as we can. But thanks for your feedback, thanks for your input, thanks for your thanks. Thank you for those of you who are writing to say we've been a great support this time. That means a lot to us, and means that we're doing some of the right things. We'll shortly also be sending out a survey to members, though, asking you what else you wanted to do and how else we can support you as well. So make sure you fill that in, and so we're led in the right direction by you, our members, as well. So in the meantime, it's Friday morning. We're looking down the barrel of hopefully a hot and sunny weekend. So stay safe and stay well out there and enjoy the weekend. And I hope to speak to you all soon.